I started a book with my father when he was very ill, and this goes back just about 30 years ago. I had a job in New York, he had COPD, and I went, the heck with my career, I'm going to go back, take care of my dad in Madison. So I did that, left my job. We talked about life. We talked about the restaurant. I didn't want a restaurant. When it burned down, he said, we'll rebuild it. No, I don't want any part of that. He wanted me to carry on the name of DeSalvo. And you know what that means, having kids, males. And I went, I'm going into the Abbey. I want to become a priest. He goes, geez, you can't. You don't know for sure, but anyway. So when we talked, I said, why don't we write a book? So he has an incredible memory. We sat down and he did a lot of writing. We did a lot of talking. I asked him questions. I probably filled up 10 those little cassette tapes. So that's what we started working on. Then he took a turn for the worse. My decision then was to finish the book, try to finish it while he was still alive, or be an advocate for him, be with him. So I promised him that I would finish the book someday and that he would be the star. This was taken of him 2 weeks before he died. We were in the Arboretum, and I stole a flower, and he said, if the police catch me with this, I could go to jail. I went, yeah, don't worry about it. After he died, I went back, I wrote up a rough draft. I sent it to New York to a couple of publishers, and they went, this is rough, needs a lot of work. I said, I know that. They said, what is it? Is this a cookbook or is this a novel? Tell us. I said, it's both. Well, we don't know where to put it. Thank you very much. Great book, but we don't know what to do with it. I sent one of the publishers flowers, and she called up and said, I've never been sent flowers for rejecting somebody's book. There were all kinds of excuses, but finally I sat down and finished it, and that's after I won a couple of rounds with the Grim Reaper. I went, I got to do this. I can't wait and say, I'll do it by the end of the year. I got to do it before I die, So the structure, one of the reasons they had problems with it, there are 5 different chapters. Each chapter is just one significant day in his life. And the recipes, there are 75, many of them are peasant food recipes, simple to make, simple ingredients. There's a couple of fancy ones. His mom cooked for royalty in Palermo, so there were some nice recipes in there too, but it's not a cookbook and it's not a novel, it's both. Well, the recipes are folded into or are part of that particular event, like St. Joseph's Day in Milwaukee, or when they leave Santa Flavia, the kinds of foods, or in the restaurant. So every recipe is folded into and appropriate for that particular chapter. Chapter 1 is when he leaves Santa Flavia. Now, my dad was 6 years old when they left, he and his mom. My grandfather, Mr. Ben, I can talk like, he used to talk like that, he really did. He left when my dad was 3, so it's my dad and my grandmother, Vincenza. They moved from Palermo or Bagheria to Santa Flavia, where her family was. They loved it. Her brothers and sisters and his aunts and uncles and tight family. It was wonderful. My grandfather sends him a telegram or whatever, didn't use a cell phone. He said, it's time to come over. They didn't want to go. So here comes some conflict, okay? They love it in Santa Flavia. Now they have to go to Milwaukee. The second chapter is St. Joseph's Day in Milwaukee. It's the Feast of St. Joseph. Now my grandfather started the Feast of St. Joseph. One of the questions you can ask yourself, which has been asked me after you read the book, should you read the book, is, was your grandfather sponsored by the mafioso? Because immediately when he got to Milwaukee, he's a kingpin. So they had, and the book is factual. I didn't embellish. If people told me stories, I couldn't prove it, so I didn't include it. But they said one was they had this huge screen of fireworks, and they lit it, and there's an image of my grandfather that they used to carry him on one of those pallets, like statues, you know? And, okay, but I'm not gonna put that in there. People go, oh, bullshit. Horse pucky, you know, not true. Okay. So in Milwaukee then is where another conflict arises. Now, remember, neither one of them wanted to come here. So my grandmother, Vincenza, calls him Cosimo. My grandfather, Mr. Ben, called him Cosmo. So she would call him Cosimo in front of my grandfather just to irritate him. So she wanted Cosimo to live the life, to have the values and the virtues of the small community and the love. And my grandfather is mafioso. He says, no, Cosmo, you follow in my footsteps. My grandmother, Vincenza, she was upset with the life that Cosmo was going to have to lead. She was upset because her friends most of her friends were back in Santa Flavia, and the friends that she had in Milwaukee, they all felt the same way. You know, nobody said, oh, it's going to get better, don't worry about it. It was awful. Every one of those wives, it was awful for them. In the third chapter, it's when they get married. That's the wedding party. And then this is a picture of my mom. How they met was my grandfather and my dad, they had all kinds of businesses, you know. They were importing olives, they sold sugar for bootlegging, they were bakers, they did all kinds of things, right? Well, when they had the bakery, my dad used to bring the bread over to Mr. Maisano, Angelo, because they had a store, okay? So he would bring the bread and, oh, who's that? What do you mean, who's that? It's my daughter, leave her alone. And so that's how they met, and then he would sneak over there at night, and then they would hand notes to each other. That's all they dared do, you know. Two things are hilarious. Those are the tedious traditions that I've talked or have mentioned. One is the trousseau that has to be on display. The bride puts on the display. Women began to dismantle the display. Mrs. Maisano noticed one, then another, and another envelope pinned to the garment. What's this? It was a $100 bill. They found, I don't know how many $100 bill in envelopes, $100 bills from the mafia. Friends from Rockford, from Milwaukee, and Chicago, okay? So that was nice. They had a good influence. The mafia also influenced my mom and dad's wedding, not so much this, but my mom's mother and family, sisters, could not sit at the head table. It was reserved for the mafia leaders out of Chicago and Rockford and Milwaukee. So my grandfather starts a restaurant. They got this restaurant going, but then the war came. So three of the brothers, four actually, went off to serve. And who was going to run the place? My dad and my grandfather. They had befriended Truex Field Airmen, and these guys were coming in, and they would bust dishes, they would help clean up and cook and, you know, close the place. They were absolutely wonderful. Without them, it would have gone down the tubes. So in the restaurant, my dad was an entrepreneur type. You know, he said, we need to do something to really set this restaurant apart from the rest in Madison. So he convinced my grandfather that they should make and sell French fried shrimp. So grandfather finally trusted my dad. My dad could then go, this is my life from now on. We had a couple of funny things happen. St. Patrick's Day was a big celebration. And you remember, this is a Sicilian restaurant. There wasn't an Irishman in the bunch. The fifth chapter takes place in the hospital. And that's when they reminisce and they start talking about some of the things that happened. And my dad would be open, but always legally open. They'd ask him questions about Yeah, the mafia. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. They ask him questions about bootlegging. Of course we did it. It's like everybody did. Everybody made a living. I mean, the guys in New York are killing people, stealing from them, their clients. What are we doing? We're selling sugar, we're selling booze. And there's a couple of episodes going to Milwaukee that were pretty funny with my mom in the car, and she's pregnant with my sister. I can't get into that. It's more fun to read it than for me to tell the story. My father was very sensitive, he was very strict, he was very giving, and he was a hell of a guy, He never, ever hit me, but he had a look. If I did something wrong, rather than, back of the head, he'd go, he wrote a lot, and in the book, indented and italicized are his words. And he remembers so much about Milwaukee when he first got there. It's a good read. It's fun to read. The recipes are easy to make. And there are a lot of fun pictures to look at. Enjoy your thoughts and your memories. And save the things. Give them to your kids and, slap them in the back of the head if they don't respond. But family traditions, even if they're not ethnic, the traditions in the family are really important. And, everybody's got a bazillion pictures, but nobody looks at them anymore. Put them in a book, then they'll look at them.